But thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I've been teaching this since about 2012 in various places around. I'll give you a little bit of preview. My name is Willie Brunetti. I'm a 22-year military retiree. I spent 10 years as a contractor here at Redstone, and a little over 13 years as a minister of education at a church in Northeast Florida. I received my Doctor of Education minister degree in 2013. I was 67. I'm the second oldest graduate in the program. So those of you who are still considering going back to school, go ahead. And my project was to create a seminar for folks caring for their parents and caring for their spouses. I've retired now 5 times. God has not allowed me to retire. He keeps pushing me out, so here we go again. And you're probably thinking, what's a big old guy like me know about being a family caregiver? Well, this seminar evolved from my family and me caring for my family over the years. I cared for an aunt who was not married, and she began developing Alzheimer's. My father had vascular dementia. My mother and mother-in-law lived with us in Florida for a total of 7 years. If you're considering doing that, or know anyone who's considering doing that, my phone number is on the bottom of that pamphlet. Have to call me, let me talk them out of it. But each of these individuals provided a real unique, what's the right word, trauma sometime for the family. It challenged me as the caregiver. It impacted my family. It impacted the church that I was working with. Everything involved, the caregiving responsibilities always began to take first place. I was also a full-time caregiver for my wife. She had a very rare neurodegenerative disease called progressive supranuclear palsy. Now, probably none of you have any idea what progressive supranuclear palsy is, but we'll talk about that a little bit. But she passed away in 2019. Yeah, turning on a little bit. This is the scripture I use for for the entire seminar. It's 2 Corinthians 1, 3 through 4. Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. And I'll be honest with you, I misread this for a very long time. I read it that God would bring someone alongside me to comfort me in my time of trouble. But that's not what it says. It says he's going to comfort me so that I can go and provide the same comfort to someone else in similar circumstances. God doesn't make us comfortable. He makes us comforters. There's a difference. The purpose of the workshop is to encourage and better equip individuals and families who are caring or will be caring for family members. As I look at it, as I've done this over the years, most family caregivers are completely unprepared for the duties and responsibilities of caring for a family member. Hopefully this seminar will provide some value to you as you for that. What I've discovered is that many of us find out we're going to be caregivers. We get a call at 3 in the morning, mom's had a stroke, she's in the ER, come now. And then from the Rosalynn Carter Institute comes the revelation that at some point we all become caregivers. It says there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who have been caregivers, and those who will be caregivers. I'm doing that backwards on it. And those who are going to receive care. I qualify as all 4 of those. I'm now over in dirt and some rocks. Sooner or later, my family is going to have to take over my care. But then looking at that, we all qualify as caregivers. But an estimated estimated 34.2 million people provide unpaid care to folks over 50. Those caregivers, of which about 95% are family, provide an estimated $500 billion worth of free care annually. If our healthcare system had to support us as caregivers, we'd break the healthcare system. But no one plans to take care of their parents. We don't set aside money or start looking at books when they turn 65 to see how to do that. Our parents grow old, our spouses grow old, and we just see them becoming not dependent on anyone. We remember them in their prime, and we don't look to the future that might take them out of the mainstream of life into a life of dependency, a dependence upon us to provide care. A little cartoon says, "It'll be so nice having my folks here, John. We haven't seen them for about a year. It scares me every time I see them. They look older. I don't mind me getting older, but I want them to stay the same." Guess what? It ain't gonna happen. Basically, this is simply a subject we don't want to talk about. Let's sit down with our loved ones and have a heart-to-heart talk about the future. Problem is, the mortality rate in Madison County and the world is still 100% unless Jesus comes. So in my mind, the best time to talk about it is now and not wait until the situation becomes untenable and reason and logic are no longer active in the process. Basically, a caregiver is anyone who provides basic assistance and care to someone who is frail, disabled, or ill and needs help. Most of our parents are accustomed to applying those skills to their children, but as many of our aging children have discovered, the roles are beginning to reverse. When I created this seminar at the seminary, I wanted to call it Parenting Your Parent. But that wasn't academic enough for New Orleans Seminary. I had to call it Comfort for Caregiver Seminar. But basically, that's what we're talking about. As those rules and roles reverse, we need to plan for that and how that's going to work, and how we as the parent and how they as the child want to assume those responsibilities. For some, it's a 24-hour. For someone who can't get dressed, go to the bathroom or think for themselves. For most part, a caregiver is a full-time, almost 24/7 workday. When I was caring for my mom, she had what they call sundowners. When the sun goes down, their ability to cope with reality falls away drastically and quickly. We kept a baby monitor in her room because she got up at night confused and we'd get out of bed and roam the house. I was always thankful she never tried to get out of the house. But I was up at least 4 or 5 times a night, calming her down, getting her back to bed, cleaning up the mess she made, and then getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going back to work. I don't have a 9 to 5. I have a when I open my eyes and when I close my eyes. Both my wife and I retired, or sort of retired, because of caring for our moms. We hadn't been on a real vacation in years. While caring for my wife, I had 2 days off a month, the first and third Friday of each month. I hired a home care group to come and stay with my wife for 4 hours while I took care of the business of shopping, all of our family business, and enjoying a few minutes alone for myself. It cost me about $19 an hour. And it was for this twice a month break. As our parents age, they are faced with the realization and loss of basic staples of life. It's a painful process when they must accept the inability to stand alone, lose their independence, or worse, that they need to be dependent on someone else to do what they value is important. It's a tough job. And and it's not fun to sit and think. Can't do that anymore. I used to run 3 to 5 miles every day. I can barely walk to the bathroom. You were going a little fast there, ma'am. Were you aware of that? Yes, I suppose I was. So you know you were speeding. Well, yes, sir. But I was just trying to get where I was going while I still remembered where I was going. And where is that? I don't know. You distracted me, and now I forgot. But when the roles reverse, we need to remember the love and to treat our parents with dignity and honor, for without them we would have very little. Preserving the dignity of our parents as they succumb to aging is the most important thing we as children can offer. After all, we indeed learned everything we know, basically, from our parents. I'm so happy you're going to Mom's birthday party next week, Larry. I printed a map to my house with directions, plus a little note about how to maneuver your way through your development and our development. I've invaded 2 countries, tracked my ways behind enemy lines, and people still don't think I can find my way to a house 4 miles from my own home. Think about it. As our parents age, their sense of reality is affected. The parents who used to help us along now require us. We need to be there to help them. Ruthie, are you all right? I'm fine, but I think I've lost my ability to fold to fit a sheet. I personally don't think anybody knows how to fold to fit a sheet. But when your patience run low or feelings of deep frustration strike, step back and reflect on the dignity that's owed an aging parent. Keep in mind what is hard for us as children is tenfold harder for our parents, because not only have they discovered they can't do it anymore, they've also discovered somebody else has to do it for them. And that's simply not a good feeling. The what-ifs of life become vivid reality, and aging parents find themselves torn between dependence and independence. And we need to be aware. Sad thing about this, Joe, is in 70 years we'll be doing the same thing. Still bald, no teeth, and wearing diapers. I got in trouble at seminary because, does anybody know why they call Depends adult diapers? Why they call adult diapers Depends? Well, see, all the kids are Pampers and Huggies, because you just pamper them and hug them. They call them Depends. It depends on who's the will, if anybody will change it or not. As our parents continue to grow old, personal cleanliness becomes a problem. It's as if who walked through the potty training. It was us who they walked through the potty training and who bathed the mud off from our childhood annex, then re-cleaned the tub again. When they lose their confidence after a fall, remember the numerous times they helped us up after a tumble. It was our parents who cheered us through the rough times and allowed us to lean on them as adults. While we were still in Northeast Florida, the ladies at the church, one of the ladies at the church was about to inherit her mother who had Alzheimer's. It was the early stages of Alzheimer's. And I had become the go-to guy at church for when that began to happen, because we were a retirement community. And she said, "What do you do for your mother?" And Mom at that point was completely bedridden. So I told her that in the morning, I get her up, I give her a bath, I change her diaper, I change her bed, and she screamed at the top of her lungs, "You change your mother's diaper?" And being the nice guy that I am, I didn't say, "Guess what, sweetheart, you're going to do it. It's coming. Get used to it." But it's our job. We got to do what we have to do to maintain the parent's dignity. One of the reasons I could do that to my mother is she didn't know who I was anymore. When she still knew me as Willie, my wife's a nurse, did all those things. Another aspect of this is to helping your parent maintain their spiritual lives. One of the spiritual tasks of life, late life, is to draw meaning of why and how they live. Your parents who ask, will I be remembered? Will my life be honored? Will my living and even my dying make a difference? They begin to reflect on their lives and their contribution to life. The solid foundation they have received through church and their personal walk can help them deal with this process. I wonder, what do you wonder, Ruthie? Well, I've gotten so old that sometimes I wonder, do all my old friends up in heaven think that maybe I ended up someplace else? But when your parents can't go to church anymore as frequently as they want to, we need to, as the church, begin to reach out to the families and the family caregivers. First of all, contact the pastor, blood lake leaders. See if they can just periodically stop by, say hi, spend some time. Having a daily prayer time with your parents can help resolve feelings of anger, fear, and guilt. It can reduce tension, unleash love, and create home. It will help you renew your family relationships, maintaining that spiritual aspect of their lives. Most of our parents grew up in church. Unfortunately, because of their disabilities, they can no longer attend. And that's a problem. Can't we talk about something more pleasant? But what I've discovered is either churches, communities, or government are preparing for our aging nation. The fastest growing age group in the U.S. and the world are those of us over 65. And the fastest group over 65 are 85 plus. If we old guys ever got organized, we could take over the world. I turned 65 in 2011. 10,000 people have turned 65 every day since then. And that's someone every 25 seconds. So our nation is aging. We need to be prepared to deal with that process. Again, the world is changing, and we need to talk about it, even as unpleasant as it is. Conversations about aging and end-of-life issues are avoided because they feel guilty for imagining the decline in the health of the loved one. The loved one didn't have about it either. To me, it's not the grief or loss one should fear. In my mind, it's being unprepared that should be feared. There comes a time when you realize that your parents are getting older, and no matter how independent they are, they're going to need your help. In my mind again, and I've realized I got to be open minded. It's time to start a conversation. So many families avoid talking until something happens. But it's more difficult to make decisions in crisis. When you're in a crisis mode, logic goes away. Whoever is the loudest and the most vocal wins the argument. Learning the process of aging takes time. It requires family involvement. The other piece of it is generally 99% of the ladies in here will become the family caregiver. I'm one of the rare men family caregivers. Unfortunately, they become what I call stuck because none of the other family want to step up. So we need to involve the whole family in the process because we can't do in the one individual. Staying ahead of the game will give you and your parents time to consider the options carefully and will ensure that your parents will get the best care possible. It will also give you a little peace of mind. Discussing the future also helps prepare your family emotionally for what's to come. Gather information. Make a list of critical information: medical diagnosis, medications, finances, mortgages, expenses, support systems, healthcare providers. All these things are integral parts of the caregiving process and need to be a part of your working on it. Caregiving is learning how to work with doctors and healthcare professionals so they will treat you as an important member of your loved one's healthcare team. Your medical team needs to understand that you are part of the team and need to seek your help and input in the care of your family member. No one knows more about them and their health than you, the caregiver. If they don't include you or want to accept you, find another doctor. When my wife was diagnosed in 2007 with a thing called frontal temporal lobe dementia, they gave us a list of symptoms that would evolve over the next 8 years. So in about year 5, we moved back up here because our children live up here and knew we were going to need help. But none of those symptoms presented. So we went to our doctor and said, this was the original diagnosis. These were the symptoms they provided. It ain't happening. And he ignored me completely. I found another doctor. And on the first trip my wife went in, she said, oh, your wife does not have frontal temporal lobe dementia. She has a neurodegenerative disease. Let me send her to UAB and let them diagnose it properly. The difference was the doc over there didn't think I was bright enough to know. The new doc accepted me as knowing as much about how my wife's condition was as he did. Research the health insurance systems. What's covered and what's not covered. Co-pays and out-of-pocket expenses. Ask questions and challenge decisions that you feel are wrong. Medicare and Medicaid systems required for college qualifications. Understand the HIPAA requirements. The law is really, you need to understand what's paid for. As an example, if you want to have home care, Medicare doesn't pay for home care. Medicaid doesn't pay for home care. Medicare doesn't pay for in-residence care. And in-residence care is something around $200,000 annually. Finances. Who's going to pay for all this? The range of expenses, prescriptions, in-home care, including medications. When we moved back here, we built a completely handicapped accessible home. Because my wife was on a walker. She went to the wheelchair and eventually to bed. But we built our house around her handicap. I don't use doorknobs. I've got door handles. I've got wider doors. I've got ramps going up into the house. I'm really concerned about all these people up in Charity Lane with two-story houses and they're 50 years old. Beware of all the state laws. There's a thing called filial responsibility. It's a strange law. It's part of the Medicare law. The states all manage the Medicaid system. And if you have to be completely destitute to get on Medicaid. So they look 5 years back, see how much assets you've got. You've got a private pay until that is all gone, and then Medicaid steps in and pays. Well, when you pass, in the state of Alabama, Medicaid will come against the estate for the difference. In Mississippi, Tennessee, and Georgia, because because each state manages their own Medicaid program. They come against the children. So you need to understand the laws that are out there. Look at prepaid funeral expenses. They do a 5-year look back. When my wife passed, we put my house in a trust. If I can manage to live for 5 years, when they look back into that 5-year thing, I will not own home. The trust will. 90% of Americans over 65 want to remain in their own home. Mobility issues are chronic conditions, both of which will get more serious with time, affect their ability to do that. And often the private sector is simply not an option. A full-time home health care aide averages about $49,000 annually. Long-term nursing care facilities can cost as much as $200,000 annually. Some of them here in our Madison County are twice that. Again, Medicare and other government programs do not provide much of that assistance. The best, you need to look and see what they're going to do. Legal issues. If you haven't got it written down, someone else will have to have the responsibility to decide on what to do. I have a friend who was a chaplain at a trauma center in South Carolina. And he was telling me about a gentleman who left his wife and family in North Carolina and moved to South Carolina. Did not divorce his wife, he just left. And about 1.5 years after he arrived, he had a massive coronary and was in the intensive care unit at the trauma center. This gentleman's girlfriend was saying, "Oh, he's so sweet, saved his life, do everything he got to do," till his wife showed up, who had all the legal issues herself, and said, "Turn it off." Guess what they did? You don't have it written down, and you don't have it planned and programmed, and the people who need to know understand your wishes. It could be a problem. One of the things here, advanced life care directives. Who's going to make decisions if you're not capable of making decisions? Which of your children do you consider going to do it right? I've got a daughter and a son. My daughter is the one I've chosen because my son will go, but my daughter will say, "Dad said turn it off, turn it off." Now, you got to know who you want to be in those things. And one of the other things here is a power of attorney. That covers a range of documents, granting whoever you give that authority to everything you own. And regardless of what they do or how they use those assets, because you have given them the power of attorney, they did it right. So you got to be real careful who you assign that power of attorney to. Healthcare proxy or power of attorney for healthcare. Again, who's gonna tell the doc when you show up in the emergency room, this is what Dad or Mom wanted? Because if you don't tell them, and there's somebody there to give direction and there's nothing written down, that emergency room doctor has to do everything in their power to resuscitate you, bring you back. And if you are actively dying, that's it. Well, I was in early in an emergency room. And forgive me for this comment, please, but I always called it torture of death. Because you're putting tubes in them, you're shocking them, you're doing anything and everything you can do. And if they're actively dying, and there is a process, and the doctors know what that is, you need to understand, and the doctors need to understand, and your family understands where you stand on all that stuff. If they have dementia, you need to find out what are the tough decisions cancer, chemo, all those sorts of things. Everything there. How does your parent view the use of kidney dialysis, pacemakers, chemo, ventilators? If you're nearing the end of life, what do they want done? When my wife's initial diagnosis, we retired and moved back to Alabama. She said she wanted to be near her grandkids so they'd know Granny and not the crazy lady. But we sat down with our family, including the grandkids, and outlined the entire situation. The legal documents, the wills, the powers of attorney, everything was laid out. Plus, this is the progression of this particular disease. This is how it's going to progress, and this is how we deal with that progression. And we did that continually through her entire process. Hospice is, some folks look at that as a dirty word. Hospice is not end of life. In my mind, hospice is quality of life. It's easier on the family. My wife, Lee, had a terminal ill, and when she was in hospice and palliative care for a little over a year and a half. Hospice provided a quality of support, a quality of life for her and me and the family. Somebody showed up and took care of us, helped us deal with bathing and feeding and all the intricacies of someone who's totally bedridden. They also helped me with my spiritual issues. We had chaplains who would come and sit with me and help me deal with the loss of my life. It's all there. This may be the toughest segment you'll discuss, but it may be one of the foremost in your parents' mind. What, if anything, frightens them about dying? Are they more frightful about death, or how the end of life will be? What kind of funeral service would they like? They want to be buried or cremated. Have they made advanced arrangements? I've got a friend in the funeral business, and he told me that funeral homes are in the business of making money. It's our job as the family to make sure they make as little money as possible, but yet still provide a quality end of life for our parents or our spouse. When I was doing my paperwork with my wife, the guy I was talking with got a call, and I walked around, and I was in the funeral home. I was just walking around. There was a casket in there that was $17,000. And this was a friend of mine. And so Larry came by, and I said, Larry, he said, you know what we call that? I said, what's that, Larry? He said, we call that the guilt casket. Because when the family shows up and they haven't taken real good care of mom, they feel real guilty. So they figure if they go buy a $17,000 casket, they'll feel better. But there's a whole lot easier way to do that. And unfortunately, I got way too many stories. But when my dad, he threw 2 blood clots in the base of his brain and lived another 10 years. Somewhere in that process, about 5 or 6 years into it, he lived way out in the country. We lived where he was, not the end of the world, you can see it from there. And so my wife and I drove down, she stayed with Dad, and I took Mom to the local funeral home. He thought I was crazy. Well, we went in and started talking, and the guy said, well, ma'am, here's a ball that's guaranteed not to leak for 100 years. And I turned to Mom, and I said, Mom, you gonna check? I'm weird, I know. But I couldn't have done that if Dad had been in the morgue. But Dad was home watching baseball with my wife. So we were able to sit down, put together a reasonably cost-efficient funeral for Dad. And when he did pass, all we had to do was pick up the phone and say, Mr. Brunetti's passed. Do whatever you do. Made it a whole lot simpler on the family. Because we didn't have to make all those arrangements. Caregiving from the distance. I was still in the military when my dad threw his blood clot, so I was caring for him from San Antonio, Texas, here in Birmingham, Alabama. But I was also talking to doctors. I was also talking to family here and helping mom deal with things. But I maintain a long-distance relationship. And if you're the long-distance guy, give the caregiver a little respite. I had a young lady whose mom was in Pennsylvania, and her aunt was taking care of her mom, and she was here in Huntsville. And she said, "What should I do?" I said, "Send her a box of chocolate. Let her know you're thinking about it. You appreciate what she did." This drawing displays lifespan is about as well as I've ever seen it. As you can see, the mom and dad are walking the little child through the park, and the next time the adult child is walking the two infant parents through the park. It's all coming. We need to be ready. This is how bad you need your parents in childhood. They're going to need you when they grow old. Your parents are very complex, and unfortunately, with the change in their health and abilities, they can become down and unwilling, unable to cope. As a caregiver, it would be an integral part of your job to help them deal with the stress and help them maintain a reasonable lifestyle. This is the Brunetti plan in one of our family meetings. The sign says, "Remember, as far as everyone knows, we are a nice, normal family." Normal's a setting in the dryer. The best we can hope for is to be reasonably abnormal. Any questions? If not, thank you for your time. Yes, sir.
You use the term palliative care. Would you define that, please?
Palliative care is a pre-thing to hospice care. It's bringing in a relief system to help deal with the traumas. We were in palliative care. The hospice care is a 6-month process. At the end of the 6th month, they come back and reevaluate you and see if you're going to. My dad was in and out of hospice like 8 times because he would. But it was when they came back and reassessed the wife, they moved from palliative care to hospice care, which changed what the nurses did, what the aides did.
Is it conceivable to go from palliative to hospice, back to palliative, and then back to hospice?
Yeah, within reason. There's more rules and regulations, and Carter's got a little bit of pills, but for the most part, you work with the system. I work the system. They were real surprised that I knew the system, which made it a lot easier on me. Anything else? Again, there are still handouts back in the back. Take whatever you would need. And I would really like it if you all come back next Tuesday at 6:30. We'll start on taking care of yourself. Not only do you take care of your parent, but you got to take care of yourself in the process. Yes, sir?
But I know this is using the term parent, that's probably the most common situation for me.
Yeah.
But you could kind of substitute parent for spouse, maybe, or sibling, or
Spouse, siblings, aunts, uncles, relatives.
even a friend.
Yeah, like I said, I had an aunt that was not married, and I helped care for her. And I've got folks around that I've helped deal with over the years. Our Alzheimer's support group that meets on the fourth Sunday at 2 o'clock. We've worked through a bunch of things like that. If you're really in a support system, this is a quality group because they'll help you work through all those problems. Someplace you can come and sit down and say, just shake your head. Some come and cry, some come and scream. But it's this sitting down and this exchanging ideas and concepts that help you deal with all the trauma. Like I said, told somebody today that during all the process with my wife, my dog went out more than I did. But it was a process. And this group helped me deal with that process. Anything else? Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.